Thousands of Palestinians today flocked to the distribution center of aid as instructed by Israel and the Americans through the organization Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. But what happened then? For the third day in a row, Israel opened fire at these Palestinians, killing at least 27 Palestinians today and injuring tens of other Palestinians. To discuss this and more, I'm joined today with my friend and colleague, Matt Kennard. Matt, I really want to discuss this Gaza Humanitarian Foundation and what is it really doing. But first, can you tell me more about what you heard today about the killing of the many Palestinians while they were waiting to receive food to feed their children?
Yeah, well, it's not a coincidence. That's what I'd say. I think that the latest stage in the genocide is to try and move even more Palestinians into the south. And the Israelis have blocked all aid into Gaza since March 2nd. And they've had to restart it. Israeli politicians have said they restarted it because they were getting pressure from their allies. So they said, we want to get the operation done. If we have to give a bit of aid, and that allows us to get the operation and the genocide finished, we'll give them some aid. So what they've done is they've privatized the aid. But effectively, it's an allegedly Israeli funded institution, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. It's actually an American organization which was set up in February of this year in Delaware. And what it is it's a way of them moving Palestinians by putting aid centers in the south. So the main ones are in Rafah. And what they'll do is they'll get starving Palestinians to move from their homes or from their tents to the south, and then they'll shut the door behind them. And in terms of the actual massacres that are taking place, I think that's also part of the plan, because I think they want to create such terror and such acute fear that they pressure third countries to take the Palestinians, which is the ultimate Israeli and US goal. Last month, there was a leak to NBC News that Trump was talking to the Libyan government to take 1 million Palestinians. Apparently that didn't happen, but it still might happen. But my sense is that this aid program is part of the effort to completely cleanse Gaza of its Palestinian residents and then turn it into a new Dubai.
But what I don't really understand is that this mechanism of distributing aid and food to the Palestinians was assigned by the Americans and the Israelis. And when the Palestinians actually listen to the Israelis and the Americans and go to these distribution centers, they get shot at and they're being killed. Not one or two. Tens of Palestinians are being killed. So what should the Palestinians do? Like, if we go to these distribution centers, we're getting shot at and killed. If we stay, we will starve to death. What should the Palestinians do? And what is the Israeli plan here?
Yeah, well, I don't know what Palestinians have to evaluate. I was seeing people on the ground in Gaza tweeting, don't go anywhere near the US new aid distribution centers because they're set up to massacre Palestinians, essentially. But then,
and not only to massacre the Palestinians, but also to kidnap the Palestinians.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah.
But it's a new low. Like with the genocide over the last nearly 2 years, you've always thought they can't reach a new low, but every time they manage it, and with weaponizing and politicizing aid in this way after starving Gaza for 2 months is sick. But it is part of a bigger project to move people. If you look at what they're doing alongside the aid distribution and beside the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, is them evacuating Khan Yunis completely, large parts of Deir Bala in central Gaza, which was previously kind of protected, or at least sort of protected, have been evacuated. And they're being pushed into little concentration zones like Al-Mawasi, which is meant to be a safe zone, but isn't a safe zone because that's getting bombed as well. And what it is, as I said, I think is about creating such terror that the international community or some country is forced to take the Palestinians, because, as we know, since the start of this genocide, Netanyahu's plan and his administration's plan has been to finish the Zionist project, i.e. to create a Palestine without Palestinians.
Yeah.
And
yeah, that was very clear from the beginning. And I remember, Matt, a few months after the beginning of the genocide, you and I sat down at the Frontline Club and you asked me, what is the Israeli make-up plan here? And I responded from the very beginning of the genocide. I responded that the plan is clear. Israel wants to ethnically cleanse the people of Gaza, all of the people from Gaza. And you know, what was surprising to me, it's not actually surprising, is that from the very beginning of the genocide, Israel meant to create this system of control against the Palestinians in Gaza. From the very beginning of the genocide, they started to control the food and the water and the fuel that gets into Gaza. And this Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is part of the system of control. They don't only want to control our lives and our movement and our freedom, but they also want to control what we consume, what we eat, what we drink, what we do, what we don't do. And all of that, I believe it's part of the bigger plan to ethnically cleanse the Palestinians, to make the lives of the Palestinians intolerable. They don't want the Palestinians in Gaza to feel that they have air to breathe or food to consume or water. They want to control all of our life, starve us and bomb us to make it impossible for any human being to live in Gaza, and then eventually maybe find a place for the Palestinians to go. And I never thought that actually this could happen. After the second ceasefire, I thought, okay, Israel did not manage to implement its plan, but I was shocked that Israel was allowed to resume to the war again and again and bomb the Palestinians and starve them for over 60 or 70 days, and the world is watching and doing nothing. And we have been talking about ceasefire, and there was a proposal by Witkoff to Hamas, to which Hamas agreed to, but then Witkoff said no. So tell me, what do you know about the ceasefire?
Well, the current one on the table, which is one that's been signed off by the Israelis and the Americans, is that there'll be a 60-day truce and 10 hostages will be released, Israeli ones that are currently in Gaza, in exchange for over 1,000 Palestinians. But my take is that the presentation by Witkoff and the Israelis is to give the impression that they're seeking a ceasefire but making the deal impossible for Hamas to accept. Because Hamas have said in response, and this makes sense, is that we have no promise that at the end of the 60-day truce that the conflict won't resume or the war won't resume. And the other thing is that the Israelis want them to release the hostages in 2 batches early on in the 60-day truce. And they're saying, well, if we do that, you're just going to restart the war even before the end of the 60-day truce. But so Hamas haven't accepted it. And I think that what you see time and time again with the US and Israel is 2 things. One is that they create frameworks and ceasefire agreements that Hamas can't accept. And second one is, even when they do put them in place, the Israelis just renege on them straight away, which is what happened in the previous ceasefire, if you remember. And the reason for this is Israel and the US, which is backing it all the way, don't want a ceasefire because they want their the genocide to continue, and they want their final solution to the Palestinian problem to be enacted now. They see their pretext. But they need to be throwing some chips to the hostage families in Israel. They need to be saying, we are negotiating, because the hostage families are saying, well, we need to get our people out. And now Netanyahu is coming under a lot of pressure. So in this way, they can say, well, we are offering something, but Hamas are so unreasonable that they're not accepting it. But obviously, we know that's not true. But the hostages have never been a priority for Netanyahu. They've killed a lot of hostages. All the hostages that have been released, well, nearly all the hostages that have been released have been done through negotiations. If it was seriously about a hostage rescue operation, which is how they present their Gaza genocide, then they would have been negotiating from the start, and they could have ended it much earlier. But the ceasefire is part of a bigger plan. And then to go to your point about the current humanitarian aid situation and the control of all Palestinian life in Gaza. Again, the reason they privatized it, the reason they've created this humanitarian foundation, which is a Orwellian term, because it's run with mercenaries and they're killing people. There's nothing humanitarian about it. But the reason they did that was because they don't have full control of the UN. And the UN was running the aid program not perfectly, but successfully, in terms of they were getting aid in when they were allowed to by the Israelis, and there were small distribution points all over Gaza. under the current privatized one, the Israelis have complete control with the Americans over where they are. So they put them all in the south to move the Palestinians. They have complete control over the use of force around those sites. And they're using American mercenaries to do that, who are also shooting people, by the way. And the other thing is, it's much easier to escape accountability if you use private contractors.
Yeah.
Because there's no mechanisms really for getting accountability when those mercenaries start killing people. And I think that we're not going to see any change until the Israelis get their final solution done, which is to make life so intolerable, which they've been trying for so long, that Palestinians can't survive any longer, and a third country is forced to take them. And you're seeing it in the West Bank too. Just to go to the privatization issue, I went to Palestine in 2016. I tried to get into Gaza, but they wouldn't let me. But I went to West Bank and did a story about how they were privatizing the occupation there. And that's been happening for decades. So now if you go to occupation checkpoints in the West Bank, many of them are not manned by the Israeli occupation forces. They're manned by private security contractors. The biggest one is called Modin Ezrachi, and there's been countless cases of them shooting people, killing people, and even though the occupation forces hardly ever have to face accountability for what they do, there's even less for the private contractors because the government have plausible deniability. It says it's nothing to do with us. So it's part of a whole privatization, and it's also the other thing about the West Bank that's different to Gaza is the West Bank is useful to the Israelis because it's a massive reserve of cheap labor. Yeah. Like when we went to Kalandia checkpoint to get just outside Jerusalem or into Jerusalem, like we were there at 5 a.m. and there were hundreds of Palestinians in little cattle pens that were going in to work in Israel and then come back in the evening. In Gaza, because it's been under siege for so long, there's the borders aren't porous at all. So they have no need for the Gazans in that sense. So now they're just like, let's get rid of them all. Let's take it over and turn it into a new Dubai. And I should mention that actually, I think the plan that's being enacted was leaked last year. Netanyahu had this plan called Gaza 2035, in which Gaza would be depopulated of its Palestinian population, and it would be turned into a new Dubai. So you'd have like the screenshots of the presentation were like huge modern skyscrapers, offshore oil rigs, solar farms, wind farms, that kind of thing. And the idea would be that you'd just obliterate Gaza and rebuild it like the sort of Gulf states. And also there was going to be a highway connection, a train connection to NEOM, which is the Saudi $1 trillion project to build this really long city all through Saudi Arabia. Again, NEOM was part of that is involving ethnic cleansing as well. Various tribes have had their land taken away from them. So I think that's the aim. And then the other part of that, which is important to mention and we don't talk about enough, is the resources that Israel gets its hands on if it completely takes over Gaza. Now, in 1999, British Gas estimated that there's 1.1 trillion cubic feet of natural gas off the coast of Gaza in the Gaza Marina. They got a contract 26 years ago to get that gas, but Palestinians haven't seen anything since. There's also 1.7 billion barrels of oil, they reckon, off the coast of Gaza. So if Israel takes Gaza, depopulates it and just annexes it, then it gets access to all those resources. There's also another oil and gas deposit in the West Bank called Meged, which is Israel has taken and used because they argue it's west of the 1948 armistice line. But this is a colonial project, and colonial projects are about stealing land, but even more, they're about stealing resources and making sure that indigenous people have no access to their resources. Look at what happened in the United States with Native Americans. They were put on, their reservations are all on the most arid land with no resources, and they chucked them a few casinos to try and keep them happy. But obviously that didn't work. But that's what you're seeing in West Bank and Gaza. And I think that unless the world stops Israel, their plan will work, because no one seems to stop them. Nothing they do, doesn't matter how many kids they kill, doesn't matter how many people they starve, doesn't matter how many starving people they kill, no one says stop, which is so the West is complicit in this plan of ethnic cleansing, this plan of total genocide that is going to end the Palestinian people and will be the final solution for that Zionism has sought since Israel was created. But I believe that the shadow of this genocide, the shadow of what they're doing, will eventually destroy Zionism itself. So what do you think about the ceasefire negotiations? Do you think that Israel and the US are good faith actors, or that there's no way that they're going to accept a ceasefire unless it's total capitulation to the genocide?
Well, I think, Matt, only a blind or an ignorant person would say that Israel and the Americans are behaving in good faith. It has been clear from the very beginning. And we have said that from the very beginning, Matt, that Israel does not care about hostages. And I'm so annoyed with the mainstream media here in the West that always say it's all about the hostages and Israel wants to rescue the hostages. But we know for sure that Israel does not care about the hostages. If Israel cared about the hostages, they would have made all of these deals that they were offered by Hamas. And even Hamas, by the way, they offered to give up all of Gaza and to hand it over to any civil or the PA to take over. But the US and Israel are both complicit in this. They're actually carrying out this plan to ethnically cleanse Gaza and destroy all of the Palestinians in Gaza. And for them, in order for this plan to happen, they want the hostages to be there. They want the hostages to be with Hamas because they use it as a justification to kill more Palestinians, to destroy more of Gaza, and to make the Palestinians cramped into these small bits and pieces of the Gaza Strip. So after the first phase of the ceasefire ended, they made sure that they go back to war, and they made sure that Hamas does not hand over the hostages at any cost. And Netanyahu said it many times before. He said, even if Hamas handed over all the hostages, he would continue the war. And someone would ask, why would continue the war if you have all your hostages back? If Hamas is no longer in control of Gaza? And by the way, Hamas, I don't believe that Hamas will ever be strong enough to be in a position like it was before October the 7th. But Israel wants always to have a justification for the continued murder and the subjugation and the humiliation of the Palestinian people. And even if there is no Hamas in Gaza, they will invent another justification to continue the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians. For Israel, the goal is clear. Ending Gaza, ending life in Gaza, the complete annihilation of the Palestinian people, whether it was through fire or whether it was through the encouraging, or what they say, voluntarily immigration of Gaza. They will always continue the genocide, unfortunately, unless they are stopped. And unfortunately, Matt, today I started this with talking about the 27 Palestinians who were shot while they were waiting to collect food. And by the way, 3 days ago when Israel killed many Palestinians, they said it was not us. The usual, business as usual, they bombed Al Ahli, then they said it's not us. They killed Shirin Abu Akleh and then they said it's not us. But then after people get used to these news, they would say that we did it. Today, Israel said, yeah, we opened fire. Then they opened fire at the Palestinians. And someone would really think, how is Israel allowed to do this? How is the West, how is the world watching starving Palestinians, waiting in queues to receive flour, to receive bread, to receive life-saving aid, and then they're shot at and killed with this barbarity, and no one is saying a word? How is Israel allowed to do all of this? And that tells you, unfortunately, that the future is not promising.
Oh, I agree with that, and it is. I feel like it's ripped the mask off the Western world, because I believe the violence and the genocidal policy that you're seeing from the West is implicit in the system and has been ever since these states were born. These are all colonial states that had formal empires, and formal empires were founded on a complete subjugation, of violent subjugation of indigenous people and stealing their resources. So it's deep in our DNA in the Western world, and we cover it up with endless nice theories about democracy, freedom and human rights. But now everyone can see what the reality is. And the important point is, we talked about the Gaza humanitarian.
Matt, I have to say something. You said something very important. The masks are off and everyone can see now the reality. But that is not enough, because we've seen the reality before. We've seen what the West did to Afghanistan. We've seen what they did to Iraq. We've seen what they did to Vietnam. We've seen the British Empire and how they destroyed the world. We've known that all along. We've known that for a long, long, long time. And now what's happening in Gaza is a little bit different because it's a live stream genocide. Now we see actually what genocide is like.
Yeah.
We see exactly what the West is doing to the people in Gaza, to the civilians. But seeing that and knowing that and realizing that is not enough. Right now we need some action.
Yeah, well, I agree with that. But I think there's another realization which is linked to what you're saying, which is that we see it, the mask is off, and the people can see it, but we can't affect our governments to stop it. So what it's also revealed is that we don't have really democratic systems, because the will of the people the government's not responsive to the will of the people. If you look at the polling in the UK and in the US, actually, a majority of people support arms embargo on Israel, sanctions on Israel, but it can't happen and I feel that that's another realization which hasn't even happened in those previous crimes that you talked about. In Iraq, there were 1 million people out on the streets, but it wasn't a regular protest that we see over Palestine. And what do we do? I mean, if we don't have democratic mechanisms where we can stop our government participating in a genocide, then it's quite a scary situation that we need to strategize about how we bring about change in that context. But I do feel like the mask being off and the mask being off democracy itself is a very important progression, and we need to make sure that we change our society. We need to change everything. What we've allowed to happen for 2 years, and Britain is a participant, United States is a participant, Germany is a participant. They're not just complicit. They have people on the ground there. They've got spies there. They've got planes over Gaza. They've got intelligence sharing agreements with Israel. We're participants. If we allow that to happen, a genocide, live stream to our phones, and nothing happens, then, as you say, we're in a very, very ugly place. But just to go back as well to what you were saying about Israel's plan, like, sometimes I feel like I'm going crazy because we've seen the Israelis tell us repeatedly what their plan is. You know, Netanyahu, a few days, soon after October 7th, came out and gave a speech about Amalek. And Amalek is one of the most violent passages from the Bible, where Prophet Samuel tells Saul that you have to go and destroy the whole of Amalek. Amalek was a rival town to historic Israel. You have to destroy everything in it. Men, women, children, donkeys, goats, camels. And he's invoking that at the start of the genocide, telling us, this is what you're doing. And then on October 9th, he had a meeting which came out subsequently in the Israeli press, a private meeting with his chief of staff, where his chief of staff is telling him how many targets they'd hit in Gaza. And Netanyahu says, I want 5,000 bombings, targets. And he says, we haven't got that many targets in Gaza. He said, I don't care. Take out the homes, destroy everything, bomb everything. That's what his words were. So this is genocidal rhetoric. Then you got Yoav Gallant going on TV when he was defense minister saying we're going to withdraw all water, food and electricity from 2.3 million people, which is a war crime, on TV. It goes on and on and on. And even now there was Netanyahu gave evidence to a closed session of the Knesset, and he was talking about the plan for Gaza. He said, we're destroying so many homes, the Gazans have nothing to go back to, so they're going to have to go to a third country. So they're telling everyone, everyone knows what their plan is. They want Gaza without Palestinians. They want it for settlers. So we need to stop living in this hyper reality where we just ignore what the Israelis have signaled their genocidal, their ethnic cleansing intent from the start. This is the plan. We need to strategize about how we stop this genocidal juggernaut, which is a juggernaut supported by the Western world. I mean,
we need to strategize. And I really wish, Matt, that Keir Starmer is sitting next to us here now. And I want to ask him, if we Palestinians and the British people, and the majority of the British people are with a ceasefire and they are with cutting relations with Israel. We have been protesting for 2 years right now, the biggest protest in Britain's history. We have been demanding some action from the British government, and the British government did not listen to us, they did not respond to us. So I really need to ask him, how does this democracy work? What is really happening? How can we make him listen to us? How can the British people make Keir Starmer, their prime minister, listen to them? What should we do? Yesterday, with Piers Morgan, I asked him, if you were a Palestinian, what would you do? Of course, he could not answer. No one could answer. What should we do? What should the Palestinians in Gaza do? What should the Palestinians in the West Bank do? What should the British people here do in order to stop the British complicity in the genocide in Gaza? Unfortunately, what's happening in Gaza right now, it proves to us that the system is broken. The establishment is evil. And we need to find new ways, a new methodology, a new means to ending this genocide. I don't know what are these means, but this is a discussion that we, among ourselves, we need to ask ourselves. And every one of us, we need to ask ourselves, what have we done to stop this genocide? What have we done when we've seen videos from Gaza of little children emaciated? What have we done when we've seen people being shot at and killed while they're waiting to collect some food to save their lives? What have we done when we've seen that? And I know some people that I'm very, very, very proud of, and they're very, very few. Some of them is this Swedish activist, Thunberg, with Liam and many other activists. They're selling right now to Gaza. And they want to break the siege. How many of us are willing to do such a courageous and a brave move like that? I think that is a question we need to ask ourselves. But anyway, Matt, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And see you next week.
Will do. We've seen nearly 2 years of Israeli genocide in Gaza perpetrated by a far-right fascistic regime backed by Washington, London, Berlin, and plenty of other Western capitals. We need to fight back against a system that allows that to happen. But first, we need a population which is informed about what has happened. Part of the reason they've been allowed to get away with it is because the media repeats their lies and doesn't cover the deep participation of those governments. At Deep Dive, we're all about investigating and exposing our own government and Western governments' complicity and participation in the crimes that Israel is committing in Palestine. But there's many obstacles to this. One of the main ones is funding. So we need you to help us keep reporting independently and promoting Palestinian voices against an industry which wants to silence them and us who are revealing the truth about what's going on in Gaza and Palestine more generally.